Valentina, please.
Yes. Okay. Is it work? Okay. Thank you very much, George, and I am very happy to open this presentation that will showcase the collections that the content providers in the WIF project offered for publication in Europeana. And then I will pass the floor to two colleagues and friends of mine. One will be John from Top Photo, who will dive a little bit into this story from the point of view of the content provider, and then to Sophie, who coordinated the publication of editorials in Europeana, which served to showcase these collections to a wider audience. And yeah, we already said many times today that we really wanted to showcase tangible and intangible heritage from cultural communities and to show them, making them accessible or even more accessible via Europeana. So our primary scope was to really create collections that are high quality, which would allow best user experience in the search and finding these objects in Europeana, and as I said, to also showcase them in dedicated stories. Yes, we made reference to this landmark document that is the Europeana Publishing Framework, which is a sort of guidance document which sets quality requirements for the objects and the metadata that we offer in Europeana, because indeed we have to find a compromise of what is published, but certainly there are minimum standards that must be met. I will now very briefly tell you a little bit about the process that is behind the scenes. It is a process that includes various actors, and the steps are the aggregation, the mapping, and ingestion. So you see in this visual that indeed there are various actors, the content providers who prepare their data sets, the metadata that they have in their own schema, to be made available for the mapping to the metadata schema of Europeana. This mapping is done via an infrastructure and intermediate. I already said that the Photo Consortium, whom I am proud to represent, is an accredited aggregator of Europeana. We use the Mint aggregation tool that is provided by the colleagues of the National Technical University of Athens with the Think Code. We heard before Orpheus from Think Code. And what we did? Well, via this aggregation tool, we sort of took the metadata schema of the content provider and mapped to the metadata schema that Europeana is using to publish the records in the collections platform. So this phase also implies quality checks to grant the compliance to the technical requirements and to the quality requirements which I mentioned before. And then when the mapping is done, we sort of pass it to the data processing team in Europeana. They are also performing additional checks. There might be some back and forth between Europeana and the content provider to refine this material, and then eventually the collections are published. And what we published. I think that WIV is really an interesting project because the overarching theme, the intangible and tangible heritage of communities, is very wide. And in fact, the collections that we provided in WIV are very different and varied and rich, including a lot of different item types, images, videos, podcasts, and the 3D content. We heard about that already. So you can find a lot of very various forms of representation of tangible and intangible heritage of various communities from many European countries. And the result, this is the result. I said before, well, it's not a big amount of data, but this small amount is 8,000. 8,000 records uploaded and published in the Europeana collections portal that really are very, very rich. They are high quality, they are varied and representative of different stories, realities, local heritage and communities. And indeed, we had this part on the aggregation of 3D records that is very important nowadays because we are moving more and more towards this idea of preserving either built or non-built heritage items via the 3D format. So we really think this is a very good result and we are super proud. And on the other part of the slide, you see the list of the content providers in WIV. I will very briefly, too briefly maybe, show you an overview of this content, but what I would like to invite you all to do is to go search in Europeana for this material because it is, I mean, as I said, very rich, very varied and stimulating for sure. So I would like to start talking a little bit about the ERIAC. I have colleagues here seated. You can also come if you want, no? Yeah, ERIAC is the European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture, and their role in this project was really precious because it was the first time that in Europeana we had content from Roma about Roma, and this was really important to, in the side of this diversity and inclusion effort to have a correct, I would say, and community-derived representation of the Roma culture. And this collection also includes a selection of contemporary artworks. I think that as with WIV, we try to be as much open access as possible. So, for example, many of these collections are either fully available open access or at least available for some creative reuse or reuse in educational context. So even the copyrighted items are offered in a shareable way. And here, well, these short slides I will show you do not give justice to the collections. This is an example from the collections in ERIAC, but please go and look for this material. Another partner that is particularly specialized is the Pedexumbo. We heard already from Rui. This is an association that wants to preserve and disseminate about traditional dances in Portugal. And dance is also, a way to transmit and live intangible heritage and local values and local cultures. So Pedexumbo offered a selection of very interesting dance video. So with the people today who dance traditional dances. And this is, I think, a super interesting and little known type of heritage that really enriches Europeana in the area of dance as an intangible heritage and practice. Then, well, I briefly mentioned Arctur, but we already heard Mateusz talk about these beautiful 3D models of these monuments and castles in Slovenia. And here we saw already the potential also, not only in the cultural heritage sector, but also in the research and the tourist promotion of countries. So I think this is, besides the technical value and the high quality of these models, it is also, a way to promote the territories and the local cultures. Then we had this big effort that Fred described before, coordinated by Coventry University, to engage with the various types of community and have these communities interact with their heritage. From this effort of local communities engagement, we derived a very varied collection of items that includes different types of contemporary collections, which was offered in Europeana through the Coventry University. And indeed, here we can find a lot of materials, including audiovisuals, podcasts, images, and conversations with experts. So it is a different type of cultural heritage. Perhaps we are more acquainted with the photos or texts or books as a cultural heritage, but indeed also this material is a way to represent the heritage and the views of various types of communities. So yeah, this is again just a few screenshots from Europeana, but yeah, as I said, you are warmly invited to explore these collections. Just a couple of words on the hosting partner of this event, CRDI. We already heard before that there was this two types of content that CRDI was able to provide in this project. From one side, all the intangible heritage of the Castellier, including a collection of images and videos and the beautiful audiovisual that we saw yesterday at the Cinema Truffaut. And then they did amazing work, technical work, to digitize in 3D the daguerreotypes. We will talk more about this later, so I'm not spoiling about this. You also can see in the screens in the cloister some footage from this collection of 3D daguerreotypes. And I want to conclude just introducing the top photo, that is a highly important UK press agency. They have a beautiful collection of imagery of almost everything. And indeed, in the Weave project, they provided the biggest amount of content, offering 4,000 historical photographs representing intangible heritage and practices and communities. And I'm leaving now the floor to John, because he will tell us a bit more about the story and how intangible heritage is represented in photography.
Yeah, thank you very much, Valentina. I'm John Balean from Top Photo, and Top Photo is a privately owned picture agency, picture library, and we have about 5 million image objects in our archive, and we were tasked with 3,500 and we supplied 4,000. So this presentation is basically a smokescreen to show some of those images, rather than, so if you get bored with the words, just wait 10 seconds and hopefully you'll see another picture. But if you're interested in the words, I've titled it Process and Discovery, and that's because the core nature of this project really presented some unique challenges for content editing, and I thought it was worth sharing with you. So the key theme of Weave, of course, is intangible heritage, and thus began the paradox, because photographic archives, of course, are tangible, they're real things, but digital copies, the transfer of this from hard copy to analog, analog hard copy stuff to digital, then makes intangible objects. So far so good, but of course what we're really looking at is what's on those things. What is the image? What constitutes intangible heritage, and how does one present images, a captured moment in time, to reflect intangible heritage? So the starting point for us was some partners in the project. So we had ERIAC, as Valentina mentioned, the Europeana Roma Institute for Arts and Culture. We also had, for dance, we had the Centre for Dance, CDER, at Coventry University, and Pedijumbo as well, representing dance in Portugal, and our hosts, which was CRDI. And I'm going to go a little bit off script. I always have a script because I have a memory of a goldfish, so you have to excuse me for that. But any of you who were there yesterday watching the film, this amazing film that was produced for this project, the Castelliers, these human towers, we looked for those in Top Photo, and we didn't find them, and it was both a surprise and a shame. It is a surprise because it is such a photogenic thing, you know, and Top Photo has so many pictures of so much, and it's not just UK, although we're based in the UK, it's a global representation of images, that I really thought that we would have something, especially after seeing that film. I thought that was there. And it's also a shame because, you know, at the end of this film there was really an appeal for archive material, you know, because we find at Top Photo often we are the guardians of other people's heritage. You know, they rely on what we've kept, preserved and stored. And it's only through all of this accessibility, through Weave and Europeana projects, that it's sort of getting back to communities and getting back to the people who sort of really engage with it. You know, we engage with it because it's an amazing picture, you know, but communities themselves, it might be their only representation of their history. So it's quite an important and vital thing. So I've drifted off a little bit there. So I'll get back to the core part. I mean, the other thing was also it's professional photography. I mean, we think photography is now in this day and age, it's so ubiquitous. You know, if we went to we went to one of these festivals, I'm sure everybody's got the camera out. But before digital cameras, it was down to these professional photographers, the press photographers, to go there and make the record, as it were. And as on that video, there was some that have almost given away, and they've kind of got lost in these archives, you know, because they have a different agenda, or, you know, it's not as open access. So reclaiming your heritage is quite a big thing. Anyway, I've gone a little bit sideways. Going back to dance, so there's ERIAC, there's Roma, sorry, I forgot to do the slides as I was doing this. The Centre of Dance. And CEDA's focus on dance was, you know, dance is a broad topic, and we have a whole range of images on dance. But Mary Louise Crawley, hello there if you're watching, mentioned the English Folk Dance and Song Society, and we actually had one here. And also Pedajumbo, you know, being folk traditional dancing, it really focused our attention to folk dancing. And it's quite obvious how dance is intangible heritage. And of course, a photograph of dance only captures a brief instance of the performance. It freezes the motion. There is no accompanying music, and it is a still moment. The photograph is somewhat contrary to the fluidity that dance embodies. However, an image is undoubtedly an extremely important record, if not the only record, of a unique performance taking place. And the original captions can also add valuable information that may have otherwise been lost. In the search for folk dance, I was really surprised by the number of images we had related to Morris dancing, and the energy and the beauty of a number of more spontaneous performances, almost transcending what I just mentioned about still photography, losing the periphery from the performance. One comes to realize that there are always opportunities to see more in a frozen moment. We discovered over 400 images related to the Roma, or more broadly GRT communities, and Top Photo was very conscious of the original captions and how historical bias in the text or even the image itself might translate to a contemporary audience. Most importantly, the communities themselves. And through the Weave project, and with the lead of ERIAC, a validation process was set up to approve the images and to improve and amend the accompanying text. As a content provider of cultural heritage, I felt this was an extremely important exercise, and even though none of the images were rejected, the follow-up workshop was essential for raising concerns about objectivity and how context is critical when preserving vintage photography of this nature. So after Roma and dance, this is the point, you know, beyond the project partners, where the finding everything else and how we at Top Photo approach the definition and discovery of intangible heritage as captured in still photography. The process really starts with taxonomy, and I appreciate the word taxonomy maybe sending some of you to sleep already, but without a legacy taxonomy structure in place, finding intangible heritage within our collections would have been much more complex. Some of you might be aware of Estelle Blaschke's book, Banking on Images. So from my experience at Top Photo being a collection that relies on commercial licensing to preserve, conserve, survive, I don't agree fully with all the things that Estelle suggests in the book, but it's very, very well researched and I highly recommend it, and details the importance of thematic categorization in photographic libraries, commercial ones in particular. The main protagonist being Otto Batman, who is an innovator in the picture archive industry. So I've stolen a couple of illustrations here from Estelle's book to briefly illustrate what he did and why it is relevant today. The most important one is this, which shows an index card from the Batman archive. Everything on this index card replicates what DAM systems do today, including Europeana. It has a unique ID, file name. It has a link to the negative shown at, a description, an original reference or shown by, a thumbnail or preview, all linking to a high resolution usable copy. And finally, under the indexed under section are the cross-referenced categories, or what we would call keywords or tags today. For us now, it doesn't sound particularly revolutionary, but I have to remind you that Otto Batman designed this in the early 1930s. And it revolutionized not only how images were stored, but also how they were presented, particularly to clients, the publishers of images. Of course, I've already mentioned the importance of context, and by dividing up and then recombining into thematic picture sets, there are concerns about recontextualization. I think, after what we've already discussed today, there needs to be a more dedicated debate than I have time for now. Possibly even a Weave 2 project could tackle it. The organisation of Top Photo's print archive does not mirror Batman, but it does use a thematic approach, roughly based on the Gibbs-Smith system, which he devised for the Holton Press picture post-photographic archive in the 1940s. Our system similarly has high-level rooms which are broken down into 26 main categories, one for each letter of the alphabet, then further divided down into a tree structure of manageable folders, say no more than 50 images per folder. And the folder location has been written on the back of every print to help with the backfiling, which was an arduous task in the days when packets of hundreds and hundreds of physical prints were sent to clients and then returned, and then we had to file it back. You could see here in this example that there are 7 levels of thematic categorization in this particular image. We have the room location, which is actually on there, called general, then entertainment, dancing, folk, English, Morris men, finally stick dance. Intangible heritage is not a common keyword in our archive, and I doubt in many archives. But having a legacy thematic structure in place, it really helped the discovery process for the Weave project. It led quite quickly to a mind map with potential topics referencing to category headings that we have in the library, to where we might find this intangible heritage in the archive. One of the main 26 categories is ceremonies and customs, and in there one might find the annual Shreve's-Tide football match, or the running of the bulls, New Year's Day, a parade or two where everybody stands or possibly sits on the ceremony. Religion is another main category heading where we thought intangible heritage would be found, whether it be a simple act of prayer, a traditional ritual or open declaration of faith, religion undoubtedly invoked the concept of intangible heritage. So much in the category of sport would be classified as intangible heritage, but we got interested in sports fans, particularly football fans. There's just something about supporting a team and the collective spirit which lends itself akin to a community, which is associated to that team, which I just thought was worth exploring, and it was great fun doing. For intangible heritage, Top Photo has so much rooted in a central subcategory called national characters. The main category heading of this is features, and to give you an idea of what features might have, it's very human orientated. It has features physical, eyes, ears, features emotions, features men, features women. Features weddings happens to be a subcategory, relevant being a tradition and a custom, often religious, and weddings also happen to include crossovers, like this chimney sweep kissing the bride in a 200-year-old tradition which goes back to a royal decree by King George III saying that all chimney sweeps are lucky. Chimney sweeps independently are indeed filed in a subfolder of features national characters, and although I have this fantastic lady sweep here, national characters is mostly a category of stereotypes, and this is the key problem for recontextualizing thematically. Everything and everyone are pigeonholed into specific boxes, or specific folders as it were in our library. One thing I was looking for, however, in terms of intangible heritage was occupations that have drifted virtually, if not entirely, out of existence, and many of those conveniently are grouped together in this section, national characters. So looking for them one by one in negative or date order or accession order would have been virtually impossible. But altogether, it makes it so much easier. So we have lamp-lighters, for example, or furnace men, craftspeople like this wheelwright, and even these road sweepers who are well aware of their future as they throw away their brooms in the air following the introduction of mechanical vacuum sweepers. I'm afraid to say that various communities also fall into national characters. The Roma, for example, and a particular UK community that I was interested in, the Pearlies, the traditional costermongers, who imitated wealthy West End Victorian society by wearing a costume of pearls. This was transformed and cemented, as it were, by a man called Henry Croft in the 1880s, who reportedly came across a discarded shipload of pearl buttons on the shore of the River Thames. And if you look closely, you will see that all the designs on the clothing of these pearlies are indeed created using pearl buttons, a tradition that is still continues today. Another community highlighted for intangible heritage was the mining community. Now they are more related to industry in our category tree. The world is still digging up all sorts of natural resources, and indeed they're digging up different natural resources now for electric batteries and things. But coal mining has faced a rapid decline. Therefore, again, it crosses over into this realm of extinct occupations. What stands out, however, versus other occupations is how the Industrial Revolution created whole towns based around mining. The miners themselves, families, and other supporting workers, all creating generations steeped with brass bands and banners. The other interesting thing I find about coal is how it's shifted from being this magic ingredient to progress and power into enemy number one against climate change. How history will judge coal is very different from those who were living with coal. again emphasizing context when interpreting historical imagery. Our age is seemingly the one that has become aware of a disappearing world, and we are facing difficult choices. What to save? What can we save? Photo history is no different, and although we are unable to preserve and make everything accessible, projects such as the Weave project have at least allowed us to present one element of intangible heritage to a wider global audience. I thank you for your time, and I also thank you for allowing me to show you some of the images that we have submitted to Weave. And until we meet again, I bid you a fond farewell and hand you back to George.